Picture this: northern coast of Gaul, 40 AD, 40,000 Roman legionaries standing in perfect formation on the beach. The most disciplined killing machine the ancient world has ever seen. Their emperor rides to the front, young, 28 years old, wearing golden armor that catches the morning sun. He raises his hand, the legions draw their swords, and he gives the order. Attack the ocean! For the next hour, the Roman army stabs the waves, javelins fly into the surf, swords slash at foam, 40,000 soldiers screaming war cries at the sea itself. When it's over, the emperor orders them to collect seashells, fill their helmets. These are the spoils of war from their victory over Neptune, god of the ocean. Then he marches them back to Rome and holds a triumph. History recorded this as the moment everyone knew for certain. Emperor Caligula had completely lost his mind. But here's what they don't tell you. 6 months later, those same legionaries who went insane on that beach participated in the invasion of Britain under the next emperor. Perfect discipline, perfect execution. They became the backbone of one of Rome's greatest military conquests. Insane soldiers don't suddenly become sane. So what actually happened on that beach? Because if Caligula wasn't crazy, if those soldiers weren't witnessing madness, then someone has been lying to us for 2,000 years. And the lie is so successful that we're still repeating it today. This is the story of how one man threatened the most powerful people in Rome, how they removed him, how they destroyed his reputation so completely that 20 centuries later, his name is still synonymous with insanity, and how 3 famous stories, a political murder and a propaganda campaign, fooled the entire world. By the time we're done, you'll realize that the mad emperor wasn't mad at all. He was murdered twice, once with knives, once with words, and you'll start questioning every crazy tyrant story you've ever been told. Let's start with the most famous story, the one everyone knows, the horse in the Senate. According to ancient sources, Caligula planned to make his horse, Incitatus, a consul of Rome, one of the highest political positions in the empire. He gave the horse a marble stable, purple blankets, a jeweled collar, and servants. He threw dinner parties where the horse was the guest of honor. This story has been repeated for 2,000 years as ultimate proof of insanity. But here's what actually happened. Caligula was 24 when he became emperor. Young, ambitious. He wanted to reform Rome, break up the old power structures. The Senate, filled with ancient families who'd controlled Rome for generations, hated him. Every reform he proposed, they blocked, out of spite, because he was young, because he was popular with common people, because he threatened their power. So Caligula made a very public threat. He said if the Senate kept obstructing him, he'd make his horse a consul, because the horse would be more useful than they were. It wasn't insanity, it was political theater. A very public way of saying, you're all worthless. The Senate didn't find it funny, but they also couldn't deny he had a point. They were blocking everything, so in their histories written after they murdered him, they removed the context. They made it sound like he actually planned to do it, like he believed the horse could govern. The second story, the Bridge of Boats. Caligula supposedly built a bridge of ships across the Bay of Naples, 2 miles long. Then he rode across it wearing Alexander the Great's armor, just to show off, wasting millions of sesterces to satisfy his megalomania. Except modern historians now believe this was a military engineering exercise. Caligula was planning to invade Britain. He needed his legions to practice building pontoon bridges quickly, the kind you'd use to cross rivers during an invasion. The ancient sources say he wore armor and rode across. Of course he did. He was a general inspecting a military construction project. That's what commanders do. But the senators writing the histories decades later called it waste and madness, because they opposed the military expansion, because they wanted him to look reckless. Not insanity, strategy. And the third story, the one we opened with, the war on Neptune. Here's what the ancient sources don't mention. Caligula marched his legions to that beach to invade Britain. Ships were prepared, supplies loaded, and then something went wrong. Maybe weather, maybe logistics, Maybe a mutiny among the officers who didn't want to risk their lives for a young emperor's ambition. We don't know exactly, but the invasion failed. It never happened. Now Caligula had a problem. He'd marched 40,000 men to the coast, promised them glory and plunder, and now he had to march them back with nothing. A failed invasion would make him look weak, incompetent. It would embolden his enemies in Rome. The Senate would use it to destroy him politically. So he did something brilliant. He reframed it. He declared the expedition a training exercise. He had his men attack the ocean as punishment to Neptune for not cooperating. He ordered them to collect seashells as symbolic spoils. Then he marched back to Rome and held a triumph for his victory over the sea. Did it look weird? Absolutely. Did people gossip? Of course. But he controlled the narrative. He turned a humiliating military failure into a strange but technically successful mission. It wasn't the decision of a madman. It was the desperate political spin of a young leader trying to save face. Propaganda, not insanity. 3 stories, all with rational explanations, all deliberately misrepresented by sources written decades after his death. But here's where it gets darker, because there's a reason those sources needed Caligula to look insane. They had to justify what they did to him. January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula is leaving the theater after watching a play. He's in the underground passage beneath the palace, surrounded by his guards, safe, protected. And then his own Praetorian guard turns on him. 30 stab wounds. They butcher him in the tunnel. Blood everywhere. Then they go back upstairs and murder his wife, bash his infant daughter's head against a wall. The entire imperial family, erased. Within hours, they install Claudius as the new emperor. Claudius, Caligula's uncle. A man the Senate thinks they can control. Weak, stuttering, easily manipulated. The official story is that they killed Caligula because he was a mad tyrant, a threat to Rome. They had no choice. But look at who benefited. The Senate got an emperor they could dominate. The Praetorian Guard got massive bonuses for their loyalty to the new regime. The old aristocratic families got their power back. Everyone who hated Caligula's reforms suddenly had exactly what they wanted. That's not saving Rome from a madman. That's a political assassination. But you can't just murder an emperor because you don't like his policies. Not officially. You need justification. You need him to be dangerous, insane, a threat to Rome itself. So they created the myth. Every strange decision, every political conflict, every moment he mocked the Senate, every unusual military exercise, all of it got rewritten as evidence of madness. Suetonius, writing 80 years later, collected all these stories. He wasn't trying to find the truth. He was a Roman aristocrat who believed the Senate should control Rome, not emperors. His Caligula is a warning. This is what happens when you give one man too much power. Cassius Dio, writing 150 years after Caligula died, built on Suetonius, made the stories even more extreme, even more scandalous. Neither of them met Caligula. Neither had access to neutral sources. They were writing propaganda, not history, and it worked. For 2,000 years we've believed them. But here's what they couldn't erase. During Caligula's 4-year reign, he actually accomplished things. He completed massive public works projects. He improved infrastructure. He put on games for the common people. He was accessible in ways previous emperors weren't. The plebs, the common citizens of Rome, loved him. They rioted when he was killed. They demanded justice. He was only hated by the Senate, by the wealthy elite, by the old families losing power. If he was truly insane, if he was really the monster they described, how did he run an empire for 4 years? How did he complete major construction projects? How did he maintain the loyalty of his legions? The evidence doesn't match the myth. So who was the real Caligula? Probably a young emperor who inherited power too soon. His father, Germanicus, was one of Rome's most beloved generals. Caligula grew up in military camps, adored by soldiers. Everyone expected him to be as great as his father. That's a lot of pressure for a 24-year-old. He tried to reform Rome, break the Senate's stranglehold on power, be a military conqueror like his father. Be loved by the people while making the tough decisions emperors have to make. Was he arrogant? Absolutely. He mocked his enemies publicly. He had a dark, cutting sense of humor. He pushed boundaries. Was he cruel sometimes? Yes, but not uniquely cruel for a Roman emperor. Tiberius, who came before him, was far worse. Augustus, the founder of the empire, ordered mass executions. But neither of them got labeled insane. Caligula was strange, unconventional, young and aggressive. But strange isn't insane. Here's what actually happened. Caligula threatened the wrong people, the richest, most powerful families in Rome, men who had been running the empire from the shadows for decades. He tried to reduce their influence, tried to govern without them, so they removed him. And then they destroyed his reputation so thoroughly that 2,000 years later, we still believe their version of events. The Mad Emperor myth was a character assassination, the most successful one in history. And here's why this matters today. We still do this. Powerful people still discredit their enemies by questioning their sanity. He's unhinged. She's unstable. They're unfit for office. Sometimes it's true, but sometimes it's just what the Romans did to Caligula. Destroying someone's credibility so you don't have to address their ideas, so you can remove them without looking like the villain. The Romans perfected this 2,000 years ago. We're still using their playbook. So the next time you hear someone called crazy, ask yourself, who benefits from that label? Who gains power if I believe this person is insane? What would I think if I heard their side of the story? Because Caligula can't tell his side. His enemies made sure of that. They killed him. Then they killed his reputation. Then they wrote the history books, and we believed them. For 2,000 years, the Mad Emperor wasn't mad. He was 28 years old, trying to change a system designed to destroy anyone who challenged it. He failed. They murdered him, and then they made sure history would remember him as a monster. That's how power actually works, in Rome and everywhere else. Thanks for watching.